There is a peculiar pain that cuts deeper than the wounds inflicted by strangers. It is the ache that comes when the very people who share your blood, your history, and your home use their words and actions to tear you down. We expect resistance from the world, but rarely do we brace ourselves from arrows launched from within our own household. And when those arrows come, they pierce more deeply because they are dipped in familiarity, sharpened with intimacy, and aimed by hands we thought would always protect us. Perhaps you know the weight of this. Perhaps you've sat in silence, absorbing criticism disguised as advice, mockery wrapped in laughter, or doubt whispered into your dreams. Perhaps every step you tried to take toward growth was met with a voice close to you saying, "Who do you think you are? You'll never make it." And perhaps you wondered, why would God allow someone so close to me to hurt me like this? But here is the truth. God sees what you cannot. He knows the secret motives of hearts, the hidden envy behind certain smiles, and the subtle sabotage masked as concern. And while you may feel unprotected, God is already building a shield around you. The silence you mistake for abandonment is in fact His careful watch. The closed doors you thought were unfair are His way of rerouting you away from deeper harm. Understand this. Sometimes the most merciful act of God is not in giving us what we pray for, but in protecting us from the very people we thought we needed. The family member who continually belittles you, drains your spirit, or mocks your faith may not be in your life by accident, but neither are they beyond God's control. He is not blind to the words they speak against you when your back is turned. He is not deaf to the sighs you release when you leave their presence, weary from carrying the weight of their disdain. He is not indifferent to the ache in your heart when you long for love, but receive only judgment. Sometimes protection does not look like removal. Sometimes it looks like God giving you resilience when they try to break you, clarity when they try to confuse you, and inner peace when they try to disturb you. And sometimes, yes, it looks like distance. God quietly rearranging circumstances so that your soul can breathe away from the toxicity that tried to suffocate it. Do not mistake God's protection for punishment. When He pulls you away from the influence of a harmful family member, it is not because He wants you lonely, but because He wants you whole. When He allows their words to fall flat instead of prospering, it is not because He wants you insecure, but because He has already spoken a greater truth over your life. When He closes your ears to their accusations, it is because He is whispering His promises louder in your spirit. When He closes your ears to their accusations, it is because He is whispering His promises louder in your spirit. Think of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery. To him it must have looked like cruelty, abandonment, and injustice. But in time he saw it clearly. What they intended for harm, God used for good. That family betrayal became the stage for his destiny. That pit became the pathway to a palace. And the same God who turned Joseph's pain into purpose is the God watching over you today. So when you feel the sting of betrayal within your own home, remember, God is not unaware, nor is He idle. His protection may not be loud, but it is precise. He is keeping you from battles you cannot see, shielding you from destruction you cannot imagine, and strengthening you for blessings you cannot yet hold. Pause here and take comfort. The very relative who tried to bring you down will one day witness that God Himself has lifted you higher than their words, higher than their schemes, and higher than their doubts. God knows the hidden motives of the heart, even when family masks it with love. One of the most difficult realities to accept in life is that not every smiling face is a safe face, and not every kind word is spoken from a place of love. The hardest deception to discern is not the one from a stranger, but the one wrapped in the voice of a family member. They may sit at the same table, share the same bloodline, and call you by your childhood name, yet their heart toward you is not filled with blessing but with bitterness. And this is where the comfort of God's all-seeing wisdom becomes your greatest anchor. For while you may be fooled by their gestures, God never is. He knows what lies beneath every laugh that feels a little too sharp. He sees the envy behind the congratulatory words that don't ring true. He discerns the pride hidden in the advice that is really criticism in disguise. Where you are blinded by the bonds of family and loyalty, God is not. He does not only hear what is said aloud, but he listens to the whispers of the heart, and in his infinite mercy, he moves to protect you from the poison of intentions you cannot yet see. It is easy to believe that love always comes from kin, that closeness guarantees care, but Scripture reminds us otherwise. In the Psalms, David lamented how it was not an enemy who betrayed him, but a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. The betrayal that cuts deepest is the one delivered by someone who should have been a source of strength. Yet David's words also remind us of something greater, that God is never blind to the motives of men. He knows when jealousy is brewing in the shadows. He knows when manipulation is being wrapped in comforting tones. He knows when someone in your own circle is quietly working against you. That is why you sometimes feel a restlessness in your spirit after conversations with certain family members. On the surface, they have not said anything outrightly harmful, yet your heart feels heavy. That is not paranoia. It is discernment. That is God tugging at your spirit, whispering that not everything presented as love is genuine. He is alerting you to the hidden currents so that you will not be swept away by them. And here is the comfort. You don't have to spend your life investigating motives or proving the insincerity of those who pretend to support you. That is God's domain, not yours. He knows the heart better than you ever could. What he asks of you is to trust that he will shield you from the venom that others hide behind smiles. The betrayals you never discover, the curses you never hear, the plots you never see. These are all things he has already intercepted on your behalf. When you walk with God, you can stand in the assurance that no hidden scheme will prosper, no veiled attack will succeed, and no heart filled with envy can undo what he has ordained for you. The motives they try to bury deep are already exposed before the throne of God. And because he is just, he will not allow those secret intentions to determine your destiny. So, when you feel confused by someone's behavior, when their words of love sting like criticism, when their presence leaves you feeling smaller instead of stronger, lean on this truth. God already knows. He has already measured their heart, and he is already protecting yours. Protection often comes in the form of separation and distance. When we think of God's protection, we often imagine him striking down enemies or silencing their voices. We picture dramatic rescues, where the wrongdoer is exposed and the faithful are publicly vindicated. Yet often, God's protection is quieter, gentler, and less dramatic. Sometimes his greatest shield is not confrontation but separation. Sometimes his love removes you from the very people you thought you needed most, because he knows their influence will only pull you away from the person he is shaping you to be. This is one of the most painful forms of divine protection because it feels like loss. When a family member distances themselves, when the phone calls stop, when the invitations no longer come, you may be tempted to think something is wrong with you. You may even question God, asking why he would allow your own blood to treat you with coldness or exclusion. But what if that distance is not rejection? It is rescue. What if the silence you interpret as abandonment is actually God's hand removing you from constant harm? There are seasons where God deliberately creates space between you and those who consistently belittle you, discourage you, or speak against your dreams. He knows that their words have the power to plant seeds of doubt in your mind, and so He pulls you away before those seeds can take root. You may resist it at first, trying to cling to relationships that were never meant to carry you into the future God has planned, but over time you begin to see the wisdom in His ways. Without the constant criticism, your spirit begins to heal. Without the subtle sabotage, your confidence begins to grow. Without the draining presence, your joy begins to return. Think of the eagle and its young. When the eaglets are ready to fly, the mother stirs up the nest, making it uncomfortable, pushing them toward the edge. What seems like cruelty is in fact love. She knows they cannot grow strong while clinging to the comfort of the nest. And so it is with God. He allows discomfort, distance, even rejection, to move you out of environments where your wings cannot spread. Separation is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is the shield. By removing you from their reach, God is protecting you from wounds that could have scarred you for years. By putting distance between you and their negativity, He is protecting your faith from corrosion. By closing the door to constant interaction, He is protecting your calling from being suffocated before it can even breathe. Even more, you may not understand it now, but in time you will see. Had you remained too close, their words would have chipped away at your spirit. Their doubt would have strangled your faith, and their envy would have dimmed your light. But God in His mercy said, "Not this one, not my child. I will protect them, even if it means pulling them away from the people they thought they couldn't live without." So if you find yourself distanced from a family member who always seemed to drag you down, don't rush to close the gap. Don't force what God has separated. Instead, trust that His distance is not a punishment, but a shield. Sometimes the very space that breaks your heart is the space that saves your soul. The pain of family betrayal prepares you for divine elevation. There is a strange paradox in the way God works. The very experiences that wound us the most often become the soil in which our greatest growth takes place. Pain is never pleasant, betrayal is never welcome, and rejection by family cuts deeper than any sword. Yet God, in His divine wisdom, allows these wounds to serve as preparation. What you perceive as destruction is, in His hands, construction. When you endure betrayal from those closest to you, you are forced to lean on God in ways you never would have otherwise. The support system you thought you could trust collapses, and in that collapse you discover the only foundation that cannot be shaken. You find yourself running into the arms of the Father, not out of comfort, but out of necessity. And in His presence you are refined, strengthened, and reshaped into someone who can stand where you never thought you could stand. Consider Joseph again. His brothers despised him, not because of what he had done, but because of the favor God placed upon him. Their betrayal was merciless. They plotted against him, threw him into a pit, and sold him into slavery. On the surface, it was cruelty of the highest form, but in heaven's perspective, it was training ground. The pit became preparation for the palace. The betrayal became the path to his destiny, and Joseph himself would later declare to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." This is the hidden truth of family betrayal. God never wastes it. He uses it to strip away pride, to cultivate humility, to teach endurance, and to birth wisdom. If you had never been betrayed, you might have grown dependent on human approval. If you had never been rejected, you might have tied your identity to their validation. But the pain forces you to anchor yourself not in the fragile acceptance of men, but in the unchanging truth of God's love. Pain teaches you discernment. Betrayal teaches you strength. Rejection teaches you resilience. Each wound that once brought tears becomes a scar that tells a story of survival, of growth, and of God's unwavering presence. It is not by accident that those who rise to greatness in the Bible often endured betrayal from those closest to them. David was hunted by Saul. Moses was doubted by his own people. Jesus himself was betrayed with a kiss by a disciple he had called friend. Yet in every case, the pain became the gateway to a greater calling. So when you feel crushed by the weight of family betrayal, remember that God is not merely allowing you to suffer. He is shaping you. He is carving strength into your soul, depth into your character, and wisdom into your spirit. What feels like loss is often the refining fire of preparation. The tears you cry now are watering the soil of future elevation. When the day comes for God to lift you higher, you will look back on the betrayal that nearly broke you and realize it was the very thing that made you unbreakable. You will see that every harsh word, every cutting action, every wound inflicted was used by God to build in you the resilience required to carry His blessing. The pain you endured in secret was not wasted. It was the divine classroom preparing you for the stage where He will place you. God's promises over your life silence every word spoken against you. Words have power. Family members who bring you down know this all too well. They speak doubts, criticisms, and cutting remarks, not always in anger, but sometimes in calculated whispers meant to chip away at your confidence. They may say, "You're not good enough, you'll never succeed," or "You're wasting your time." And though you may pretend their words roll off your back, deep inside they can echo in your soul, becoming burdens that follow you into your quiet moments. But here is the hope. The words of man are temporary, but the promises of God are eternal. What He has spoken over your life has greater authority than anything spoken against you. When He calls you chosen, no insult can strip you of that identity. When He declares you blessed, no curse can undo it. When He says He has plans to prosper you, no voice of doubt can derail it. This is why Scripture reminds us that no weapon formed against us shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against us in judgment shall be condemned. Family members may rise against you with words sharp as daggers, but those daggers cannot pierce the armor of God's promises. Their judgments cannot overrule His decree. Their gossip cannot silence His voice. Their doubt cannot diminish His plan. Think of the Israelites on their journey to the promised land. Nations rose against them. Enemies spoke against them, and even among their own people there were voices of fear and doubt. Yet, every time God's word stood firm. His promise of deliverance, protection, and blessing prevailed over every opposing voice. What He had spoken could not be cancelled by the fear or rebellion of men. The same is true for you. There may be relatives who belittle your dreams, laugh at your faith, or remind you of your failures, but their words are like smoke in the wind. Loud for a moment, but quickly vanishing. God's word, however, is like a rock, solid, immovable, and everlasting. When He speaks life into your destiny, it resounds louder than every insult whispered in your direction. And here is the beauty. Not only do God's promises silence the voices of others, they also silence the voice of doubt within you. Because sometimes the most dangerous words are not those spoken by others, but the ones you begin to believe in your own heart. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe God can't use me. These lies can grow louder the more you hear negativity from family, but the moment you return to God's promises, those lies lose their power. His truth replaces your doubt. His affirmation drowns out their criticism. His vision for your life eclipses their narrow judgments. So when words come against you, speak His promises back into the air. Declare His truth over your life. Remind yourself that what God has spoken carries eternal weight. Their words may bruise, but His words heal. Their insults may wound, but His promises restore. Their judgment may sting, but His grace covers. Every word they speak against you is temporary noise. Every word God speaks over you is eternal truth. And in the end, truth always triumphs over noise. He gives resilience to endure the wounds inflicted by loved ones. There is a particular heaviness that comes from wounds inflicted not by strangers, but by those who carry your own last name, those who share your table, those whose voices you once trusted without question. Their words cut deeper because they come from mouths you thought would always bless you. Their actions sting harder because you expected their hands to lift you, not push you down. And yet, even in this, God does not leave you defenseless. Instead of removing you from every blow, He equips you with resilience, an inner strength that bends but does not break, that absorbs the hit but still stands, that bleeds yet continues to live. Resilience is not the absence of pain, it is the ability to survive it. It is the quiet strength to keep moving forward when everything in you wants to stop. It is the supernatural grace to walk into a family gathering knowing some will not celebrate you and still carry yourself with dignity. It is the unshakable faith to continue pursuing your calling even when those closest to you dismiss it as foolishness. And this resilience is not something you conjure on your own, it is a gift from God. Paul, the apostle, knew this well. He wrote that he had been beaten, persecuted, abandoned, and yet not destroyed. What carried him through was not his own ability to endure, but the resilience given by God's Spirit within him. The same Spirit lives in you. When family wounds threaten to break your spirit, God's Spirit fortifies you. When betrayal feels like a weight you cannot carry, His Spirit strengthens your shoulders. When rejection threatens to silence your voice, His Spirit keeps your words alive. Resilience is often forged in fire. You may not realize how strong you are until you have survived the sting of a loved one's harsh judgment. You may not realize how deeply rooted your faith is until you have endured being misunderstood or mocked by your own. These experiences, though painful, reveal the strength God has planted within you. They show you that your identity is not at the mercy of human approval. They teach you that your destiny does not collapse under human rejection. Picture a tree battered by wind and storm. Its branches may snap, its leaves may scatter, but its roots remain deep. In fact, the very winds that threaten to topple it force its roots to grow deeper, anchoring it more firmly into the ground. And so it is with you. The storms stirred up by family betrayal may strip you of comfort, but they drive your roots deeper into God's love, deeper into His promises, deeper into His truth. And the deeper your roots, the taller you will stand when the storm passes. There is a kind of beauty in resilience. It does not erase the scars of betrayal, but it transforms them into marks of survival. It does not silence the memory of hurtful words, but it renders them powerless. It allows you to walk through the fire and come out not smelling of smoke. It allows you to encounter rejection and still hold on to love. It allows you to be broken in places and yet remain whole in spirit. This resilience is not by accident. It is God's shield within you. It is His way of saying, I may not stop every blow, but I will make sure every blow only strengthens you. You are not weak because you feel the pain. You are resilient because you survive it. And that survival is evidence of God's hand upon you. There is a mystery at the heart of God's work in our lives. He takes the very things designed to destroy us and uses them as building blocks for our destiny. The betrayal you endured, the ridicule you suffered, the rejection you felt, none of it is wasted. What they meant to break you becomes the material God uses to build you. Every cruel word spoken against you by a family member was meant to tear down your confidence, but instead, God uses it to anchor your faith in Him, not in their approval. Every act of betrayal was meant to crush your spirit, but instead it drives you closer to His presence, where true healing begins. Every dismissal of your worth was meant to silence you, but instead it compels you to listen more carefully to the voice of God that calls you chosen, precious, and beloved. Think of a sculptor with a block of marble. To the untrained eye, every strike of the chisel looks destructive. Pieces are chipped away, fragments fall, and the stone seems diminished. But the sculptor sees the form hidden within. Each strike is not meant to ruin, but to reveal. And so it is with your pain. The wounds inflicted by family members may feel like they are breaking you apart, but in God's hands, they are revealing the strength, the beauty, and the purpose that was always within you. When Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, their intention was clear: to erase him, to reduce him to nothing. But what they meant for harm, God used for elevation. The pit became the path to the palace. The betrayal became the gateway to destiny. And the very brothers who tried to erase him one day bowed before him, witnesses to the fact that God had turned their cruelty into His crown. Your story follows the same divine pattern. Those moments you thought would end you will one day be the very testimony that defines you. The rejection you thought you could not survive will one day be the reason you are able to lift others out of their pain. The betrayal that nearly broke your heart will one day be the platform upon which you speak of God's faithfulness. There is a peculiar strength in brokenness. Glass once shattered cannot return to what it was, but it can be remade into stained glass, refracting light into colors more brilliant than before. Likewise, the breaking you endure is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a more radiant one. What they did to shatter you, God will use to shape you. What they tried to silence, God will amplify. What they thought was your downfall will become your foundation. So, do not despise the breaking. Do not curse the betrayal. Do not resent the rejection. In the hands of man, it may have been meant to harm you, but in the hands of God, it becomes the very tool of transformation. Every scar will testify not of their cruelty, but of His power to redeem. Every wound will proclaim not of their intent to destroy, but of His intent to elevate. What was meant to break you will build you into the person God always knew you could become. Every attempt the enemy makes to pull you down, whether through the cruelty of strangers or the betrayal of family, is not unknown to God. He sees it all. And here is the great paradox of His protection. Not only does He shield you from destruction, but He also uses their very attempts to bring you down as stepping stones to lift you higher. What they meant for defeat becomes the material of your destiny. Family members who sought to weaken you by their words do not realize that every insult only pushed you closer to God's promises. Every attempt to belittle you made you hungrier for His truth. Every moment they tried to silence you only drove you to seek His voice more deeply. Their plan was to tear you down, but God's plan was to use their actions as the foundation upon which He would build your testimony. Think of David standing before Goliath. His own brothers mocked him, belittling his courage, questioning his motives. They wanted him silent, small, and hidden. Yet their ridicule did not stop him. It only positioned him for the moment when God would use him to bring victory to Israel. Their dismissal became the backdrop against which God's glory was revealed through David. In the same way, those family members who dismiss you do not realize they are setting the stage for God to display His power in your life. God's protection is not passive, it is active, precise, and intentional. He does not merely stop the harm from reaching you, He bends the harm into a pathway that leads to His greater plan. When Joseph was thrown into the pit, it seemed like destruction. When he was sold into slavery, it looked like ruin. But each step, painful as it was, moved him closer to the palace where he would one day save nations. The very hands that tried to push him down unknowingly pushed him into God's plan. So it is with you. The words that were meant to discourage you became the reason you sought God's encouragement. The rejection that was meant to isolate you became the reason you discovered His presence in solitude. The betrayal that was meant to destroy your trust in others became the reason you learned to trust Him completely. What they thought would end you is what God will use to elevate you. And this is the beauty of divine protection. It does not only guard, it transforms. The fire that was meant to consume you becomes the fire that purifies you. The storm that was meant to drown you becomes the storm that reveals His power to calm waves. The pit that was meant to bury you becomes the place from which God raises you up. Every attempt to pull you down is intercepted, reversed, and transformed until it serves His higher purpose for your life. That family member who tried to keep you small will one day see you standing tall, not because you fought back, but because God Himself lifted you. That relative who thought their words could crush your dreams will one day see those dreams fulfilled, not because you sought revenge, but because God's promises cannot fail. And when that day comes, you will know with certainty that every attempt to pull you down was not the end of your story, but the beginning of God's greater plan for you. Hear this truth and hold it close. You are not unprotected. You are not unseen. God has been guarding you even from the wounds of those closest to you. He has seen the envy in their hearts, the weight of their words and the sharpness of their betrayal. And yet, through it all, He has shielded your spirit, built your resilience, and redirected your steps toward destiny. The family member who brought you down did not derail your purpose. They unknowingly confirmed it. Their attempts to silence you only gave God an opportunity to speak louder. Their rejection only drew you closer to His embrace. Their betrayal only carved the path to your elevation. What they meant for evil, God is already weaving into good. Remember Joseph. Remember David. Remember the countless faithful ones who were hurt most deeply by those closest to them, yet rose higher because of God's hand. You are no different. Your pain is not wasted. Your wounds are not ignored. Your tears are not forgotten. God has used every one of them as a brushstroke in the masterpiece of your destiny. So lift your head, wipe your tears, and stand in faith. The very people who tried to pull you down will one day be witnesses to the fact that God Himself lifted you. And when they see it, they will not be able to deny it. For it will not be by your strength, but by His. You are protected, you are chosen, and no family member, no betrayal. No word spoken against you can undo the plan God has prepared for your life.